The program will begin shortly.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Very good afternoon to all. We are entering the second day of our International Faculty Development Program on creative methods for teaching digital natives in higher education. I gladly welcome you all for today's session. Before we get started, I request all the participants to please mute your audio so that the presentation will not be interrupted. Now, without any further delay, we will begin the session. Today, we are honored to have Mr. Sean Hughes as our first speaker for the day. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for the invitation and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Mr. Sean Hughes is a doctoral candidate in education and also the Arthur Sankel Urban Fellow 2019-21. He is the program administrator of Applied Linguistics and Thrissur. He is currently pursuing Masters of Education in Applied Linguistics at Teachers College, Columbia University. Mr. Sean has been working as an English teacher for the past 13 years, both in the US and overseas, and has taught learners of all levels and ages. For the past 2 years, he has been a teacher trainer in Vietnam as an English language fellow hosted by the US Department of State. I gladly invite Mr. Sean Hughes to handle the first session on the topic, creating opportunities for success, engaging learners in the 21st century writing classroom. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. All right. So yes, my name is Sean Hughes. I am a doctoral student at Teachers College, Columbia University. I'm here joining you from New York. So let's see. Open my presentation here. Okay. Is everybody able to see this?
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Great. So today I'm going to talk about writing. And I know this tends to be sort of a boring subject. So this is why I pursued this subject. So as you heard, I was a fellow with the US Department of State overseas for 2 years. And also I was a writing fellow here in New York City the last 2 years as well. And what I have discovered over the years is that many of us in the teaching profession, also not only students, but also teachers, view this subject as quite boring. So I want to change your minds today as best I can. So you heard a little bit about me. I'm a lecturer and a doctoral student at Columbia. I was an Arthur Sankel Fellow with the public school system, the Department of Education here in New York for the last 2 years, where I specialized as a writing fellow. I'm a former English language fellow with the US Department of State, 2017 to 19. And I've been a foreign language teacher for 15 years across 7 countries. I completed my MA in TESOL and my Master's of Education in Applied Linguistics, and I'm currently pursuing my doctorate in Applied Linguistics here. So let me give a short overview of what I would like to talk about today, and then we'll stop at the end for some questions if anybody has. So we're going to talk about this idea of engagement, and we're going to first define what is engagement. And then we're going to take that definition and expand it to our learners. And I'm calling these digital learners, this digital era of students who we are teaching today. We're going to talk specifically about motivation, resources, and then some ideas of gamification that we can use. Then we're going to have a closing and a little Q&A. All right, so what is engagement? All right, we have to define this first when we're going to talk about engaging our learners. So I like this definition here by Elizabeth Barkley. Student engagement is the product of motivation and active learning. It is a product rather than a sum because it will not occur if either element is missing. Motivation plus active learning If you're lacking one or the other, then you're not going to get engagement. And we need to keep that in mind as we go through some of these ideas today. So I also want to talk about what we sort of think of this, digital natives today. And essentially digital natives, these are the people who are born during the era of internet. So if you're as old as me, you remember a time before internet, before smartphones. I did not grow up with internet until I was in university. I didn't have a smartphone until I was in my, mid to late 20s. So our needs, what we were taught in school, were very different than what the needs of today's learners are. And unfortunately, I think many of us are still addressing the 20th century learners' needs, what I needed when I was this age, and not addressing what today's learners' needs. So what we're going to look at here is some 21st century skills. And these skills are critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, information literacy, knowing what information is and how to use it, media literacy, technology literacy, flexibility, leadership, initiative, productivity, and social skills. So these are the general ideas of what learners today need to be productive and to be successful in their careers and in their studies. So how does that connect to L2, second language writing engagement? Well, it actually connects pretty directly. Engagement is actually kind of hard to define often. It used to be really clear cut, this idea of the students are looking at me, they're paying attention. No, that's not necessarily true today. We've done a lot of research in discourse analysis, which is my field. Also in brain synchrony, a recent study that I published, it reveals that engagement goes way beyond what we traditionally thought of as engagements. And there's a bunch of great articles if you're interested in any of this reading. At the end of the PowerPoint, I have some ideas for further reading. But this is kind of what we have done in recent research between NYU and Columbia University. We've actually looked at EEG monitors on students' heads during activities like writing. And our research indicates that, number one, students need a lot more time than we thought to process information. So when we're teaching, we can't sort of just throw things out there and say, now sit down and write. Right. Secondly, we don't allot much time for writing and learning tasks. Writing is something that takes quite a bit of time to perform, and we're not really addressing that properly as teachers. And of course, we have this repeated over and over failure to stimulate learners in class. Again, a lot of learners tend to think, oh, writing is such a boring class. It's a boring subject. And this leads to a failure of engagement, a failure to engage during class time. And then it creates this sort of a cycle, right? Where you get this disengagement, and then you get students who are just, oh, I don't even want to go to writing class. It's so boring. All right. So now we know the problem. Let's talk about solutions. So what should we do? We call these people digital natives, these young learners we've defined as people, in our case, this study was actually done with high school students here in New York City. But these are students who are born during the age of internet and have grown up with internet and technological devices their entire lives, such as cell phones, tablets, and computers. Our traditional methods, the methods that I was raised with in the 1990s, for example, those don't really apply anymore. So we have to adapt. There's this idea of instant gratification and instant access with these younger students that you and I probably didn't have when we were growing up. There's also this really in-depth knowledge of the world around them that these younger students have that many of us didn't or don't. And of course, they're much more experienced with technology than most of us. When I have a technological issue, I always ask my younger students to come help me. And in effect, we have to sort of engage with these new methods or else we risk failure. So this is Bowman 2016, a great article if you have a chance to read, that essentially says side by side, a teacher who engages digitally and a teacher who does not. The teacher who engages digitally not only performs better with students in surveys, but also the students actually perform better and receive higher grades, higher marks. So it's not just good for the students, it's also good for the teachers, it's also good for their future. So now we know, let's talk about incorporating this. So lots of studies, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are some really great studies to look forward to if you have a chance to read. They basically point to the exact same cause of failure in the writing classroom, which is a lack of motivation. Students just aren't motivated. And basically when the metacognitive and the psychological needs and expectations of learners aren't met, they fail. When we do meet those expectations, when we do meet those needs, students flourish, and nearly 100% of students succeed in things like our standardized testing. Right? This comes from several studies, but the two that I would recommend reading are De Palma and Ringer, Kobayashi and Rennert. So let's talk about motivation then. This is our first step here. What is motivation and how do we affect that? So our first step in teaching should be to motivate our learners. All right. We have to, number one, update classroom design. We need more increased student interaction. We also have to allow for more agency. And part of this is incorporating educational technology, which is a very big theme that you'll see in my presentation today. Right, so what is this classroom design that will improve things? Well, first of all, modern classrooms look a little different than our traditional classrooms, or they should anyway. A traditional classroom is sort of every desk one by one in a row, in a column, right? And the teacher standing at the front at the blackboard. A modern classroom design is a little different. Number one, it's more flexible, right? Number two, teachers shouldn't be afraid to step away from the blackboard, right? We need to interact with students more. Also allowing students to come up to the blackboard, right? Allowing them to have a chance to come up, to write, to interact. That's not a bad thing. Engagement equals interaction. Remember that first quote we saw at the beginning. How do we engage learners? The very first step is interaction. So whenever there's passive learning, when students are just sitting here listening, nodding their heads, but not actually paying attention to anything happening, and the teacher's standing at the front with the microphone essentially talking to the class, that's not interaction. Interaction happens when students are given time to interact with one another, as well as the teacher, as well as the materials. Yeah. There's a great idea of a U-shaped design when you put the desks into more of a U-shape and the teacher sort of walks around in the middle. This way, everybody has equal access to the teacher. In a traditional classroom, you have some students sitting at the back who get to sort of nod off and take a nap during class, and those at the front who have to pay attention. In a U-shaped design, you don't have that. You have everybody at the front of the class, and the teacher can meet everybody's needs, as well as making sure everybody's paying attention. There's also some ideas of group desk writing. In writing classes, I like to push like 3 to 4 desks together into a group, and then everybody's always facing somebody. If it's not facing me, they're facing a partner, but there's no opportunity to disengage, to put your head down, to look away, and to not pay attention. This allows for a lot of talk, allows for what we call in linguistics negotiation for meaning. It also allows for more talking time between students, less talking time from the teacher. Okay? We don't have to teach everything. You would be extremely surprised how well students can teach one another. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing, right? When you allow students to sort of teach one another, maybe you pair a stronger student with a weaker student and allow them to work together, then I can focus my attention elsewhere where it needs to be, right? So as a teacher, these little teeny tiny design ideas for changing up the classroom can make a really massive difference. Right? Let's talk about agency next. This is a really, really important topic. So there are 2 forms of motivation that I want to talk about today. And you've probably heard of these before. There's extrinsic, exo meaning out, right? And then there's intrinsic. Extrinsic, these are things like grades. This is an outward reward, a reward from the outside, and it's deeply external. So this is the simplistic type of agency and motivation that we can affect as teachers, right? You want to get a good grade in a class. You want to perform well on the exam. That's extrinsic, right? However, this is fleeting. It's not very long-term, and it leads to things like memorization. And when I say memorization, what I mean is how many of us have taken an exam and then a week later, you don't remember any of that information you just learned. I certainly have. So memorization does not equal learning, right? Hopefully that's clear. Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, it's much more difficult than extrinsic as a teacher to affect. This is much more personal. It's internal. It's our feelings and our emotions. And it's based on gratification. How well can I make myself happy? And this tends to be much more long-term. It leads to acquisition rather than memorization. So acquisition is defined as acquiring knowledge and being able to not only retain it, but use it in the long term down the road in the future. So extrinsic, much easier to affect, but less long lasting. Intrinsic, much harder to affect, but it is much more long lasting, and it leads to more learning versus memorization. So what is a good type of agency and motivation? Well, actually, it's going to be a balance of both. There will be some extrinsic, of course, that's unavoidable. And it's a good thing too. You want to perform well on the exam, that's a good motivator. But we also need intrinsic motivation, and this is the one that tends to be lacking in teaching, especially in writing classes. All right, so how can we increase the intrinsic motivation? That's what I want to talk about today. So on the left side here, you can see some intrinsic motivating factors. These are ideas of enjoyment, purpose, growth, curiosity, passion, self-expression, and fun. So that should give you some ideas right there about how you can increase this in your class, making it more fun, allowing for more self-expression, engaging students in order to lead to more passion and curiosity. What are we going to do in class today? I can't wait to get there and see. Right? Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, these are things like promotions in jobs, would be pay raises. In education would be something more like achieving a high mark, right? Prizes, winning, and perks. There's nothing wrong with extrinsic, but we should focus a little bit more on intrinsic because this tends to be more lacking. Okay, so let's talk about these types of motivation and practices in the actual writing. So the first thing to consider when planning an activity in the writing classroom is appropriacy. And what I mean by appropriacy is sort of this idea of the ZPD, the zone of proximal development. Hopefully, most of us might know this. It's Lev Vygotsky, a lot of writing from him whenever, almost 100 years ago now, in the Soviet Union, Vygotsky was an educational psychologist who came up with lots of great ideas. But he had the idea, the definition of a ZPD, which I'll talk about in just a moment. We don't essentially want to go beyond or below what our learners can actually do, right? So if our learners are here in an intermediate level, let's just say as an example, we don't want to go to that advanced level because that's too high for them. And what's going to happen to the motivation? Decrease. On the other hand, if we make the class way too easy and we're at a sort of beginner level when they're intermediate, then the same thing will happen. Motivation will decrease. That sweet spot, so to speak, is right in the middle at the intermediate level, and it's exactly what learners know plus one step. That is the ideal learning environment. So here's just a sort of a visual image of this. The ZPD is that sweet red spot in the middle. So the ZAD, the ZAD, this is when it's too easy. And this leads to routine and boredom and a lack of interest, right? On the other hand, this sort of yellow area, this is what is way beyond what I can do. I can't even do this with the help of the teacher, right? And so this is an unproductive activity as well. It leads to frustration. And students are thinking, I don't even want to go to class because I don't understand anything that's happening. So avoid those two and meet it somewhere in the middle, right? And by in the middle here, I'm talking about activities that are mediated What kind of mediation? Student to students, student to teacher. These are both great types of mediation, right? And this leads to engagement. And engagement is the key. Participation, active participation, and engagement. These go hand in hand, right? So how do we do this? More scaffolding from the teacher, supporting. And again, we don't have to be the only ones who scaffold. When you pair students together, they scaffold one another. And then increasing the challenge of the activity, but keeping it within the boundaries of what students can do. This is often called the I+1. This is the famous Stephen Krashen model. I being what the knowledge of the learner is currently, and you only want to take it +1. You don't want to take I+0 because they already know it. You certainly don't want to go backward and say I-1 because that's something they've done in the past. And you don't want to go too far, I+2 or 3 or 4, because that's too challenging. Take it one small step at a time. And this is where I see a lot of teachers that I work with fail. And this is where they jump in and say, today we're going to write an essay. And students are saying, man, I can barely write a sentence, right? You have to take those little steps along the way. Okay, so what are the applications in writing? Step 1, I advise using learner interest. So getting to know your learners, and each class may be different. I have a class with all boys and they love football, soccer, right? So I can incorporate that into my class. I have another class with largely female students. They have different interests. I engage with them, I figure out what their interests are, and I try to incorporate that in my class as well. Encourage collaboration. This is one of the biggest keys. Collaboration, student to student collaboration, students with teachers. There's many ways to collaborate. Step 3, create tasks that build over time rather than starting at the peak. You take the little steps, and then by the end of the term, by the end of the year, you're going to have that peak. And one of the biggest keys that we haven't talked about yet is actionable feedback. Feedback is key to learning, and especially with writing. And the more feedback, the better, but the more actionable the feedback, the best. All right, so I'll talk about what actionable feedback is in just a moment. And step 5, creating systems of reward. So this is where that extrinsic and intrinsic motivation comes in. What kind of reward is it? It can be an extrinsically motivating reward or an intrinsically motivating reward. There are different ways to accomplish that. So with these 5 steps, you're going to have extreme motivation in your writing classroom. Here's the cycle of writing, the process of writing. Probably most of us are fairly familiar with this idea of pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, publishing. To me, as a student, I always thought of it as like a line, right? In time, from the beginning to the end. As a teacher, I like to think of it much more as a circle. It never really fully stops. And even within this circle, there are other circles and cycles, right? So we have this pre-writing sort of, okay, we're gathering ideas. And this is where the teacher engages with student interests. Drafting. This is where students get to sort of organize their ideas and put it on paper, so to speak. We're exploring new ideas. And if there are new ideas that, I don't really like this, we can go back to the start and do it all over again. That's fine. Then we get to the revision stage. This is when we're actually writing, correcting our writing, changing our writing. This is where engagement comes in. Peer-to-peer engagement is really excellent here. And then also teacher engagement. Teacher engagement comes much more in the editing stage, but in the revising stage, it's a good idea for teachers to sort of come around and give notes on what they're seeing to students. In the editing stage, this is once it's out of the student's hands and into the teacher's hands. And this is when we start looking for grammar, spelling, punctuation, mechanics, structure, all those things that we get paid to do. And then the publishing stage, this is when we're sharing our writing with somebody somehow. Publishing can be as simple as turning it in as a final paper to the teacher. It could be publishing in some sort of magazine, book, article. It could be any of those types of things. But when we refer to publishing, that means sort of the final draft. So thinking about this cycle, one of the most important things is feedback. There are multiple stages of feedback that should happen in this writing circle. okay? Not only one time, not only feedback from a teacher. It should be multiple stages of feedback, multiple types of feedback. And this will go toward that sort of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation as well. We have to assess students. It's part of the process, right? That's part of what we get paid to do. How and why we do it depends on the goals, however, and not all assessment will look the same. We have to think about what is the goal? What is the goal of this lesson today? What is the goal of this unit, this week, this month? Okay? And then we have to think about, okay, how is this assessment going to actually measure the outcomes of what we're doing? We don't just assess for the heck of it. We don't just assess for the sake of assessment. We have to actually have an idea about what does this assessment mean? How does it affect the process? All right, feedback is actually what structures the assessment and the lessons. You have to adapt your lessons according to feedback and what is happening with the students. Okay? If they're saying, oh man, the grammar is really great in this class, I don't need to work on that. Well, then you don't need to teach that grammar more. But if you see that the same group of students is struggling with maybe the structure of an essay, then that's what you need to teach more. And that cycle of feedback should teach you, as a teacher, what you need to do next. All right, so how often we assess depends on the course, but typically the idea is more feedback, more assessment is always better. All right, so let's talk about two types of assessment, sort of traditional and modern assessment. A traditional assessment, this tends to be what we call a forced choice measure of learning. So essentially this is a task. You say, sit down and write an essay, you've got 30 minutes, right? That's a traditional style of assessment. These sorts of tasks are a really good snapshot of what students have remembered in class. However, they're not always good at measuring and assessing what students are capable of. It's really good idea for teachers to get an idea of what the student knows at that point in time. But again, it's a snapshot only. Like you take a screenshot on your computer or on your cell phone, right? That's only one short static situation. It's 1 second and that's it. Okay? In this case, the curriculum drives the assessment, right? The curriculum says we need a quiz. We need to conduct a quiz. We conduct the quiz. I grade the quiz. I give a mark. Next, right? That's more of a traditional style. That's how I learned. It's probably how many of us learned. A 21st century assessment's a little different. It is performance-based. It is continuous. It uses activities that reveal what students can actually do rather than what they have remembered. It focuses on real-world skills. It emphasizes student strengths instead of just weaknesses, instead of only corrections. It also tells them what they're doing well. It's scored differently than traditional approaches, and it tends to be continuous, and the assessment drives the curriculum. So in other words, you conduct a quiz, you conduct an assignment, you look at it and you say, every student seems to be struggling with this one thing. I need to teach that more. And then the next lesson you focus on the weaknesses rather than what they're good at. So different types of assessment. There's this idea of the flow theory by John Spencer, and I really like this. It's this cycle, right? And it's where you sort of do these things. You embrace student choice and agency. You get them engaged in the class, right? You help students monitor their progress. So this is what we often call noticing in education. You help students to notice where they have improved, right? Making a note on their paper. You've improved a lot on this. Well done. Here are some things you still need to work on. Okay? Positive plus corrective feedback, right? Intrinsic motivation, engaging them, doing these things will certainly intrinsically motivate. Get rid of distractions in class, put away the phones, right? Focus on what we're doing here, for example. And then providing lots of scaffolding. And again, not only teachers can provide scaffolding, learners can provide scaffolding to one another as well. All right, so teaching writing and how do we implement these things? All right, so the first step is what I call student-led inquiry, okay? Brainstorming, developing your own topics. This is where you get what we call the buy-in from learners. This is where agency starts, right? Allowing students to have that first step of, what do I want to write? Okay. Next, we have authentic purpose. The idea here is that the purpose of the writing should be something realistic. A lot of tasks that we give learners are so inauthentic, they're so fake that students can't engage with them, right? This is something I'm never going to use. All right, writing a letter to a newspaper. Most students are never going to do that. Writing an email to a colleague. Oh, well, that's something I actually need to do in my life. Sure, I want to learn that. Something much more realistic. Challenging students. Think of the ZPD once again, the I+1. You want to take it one step at a time. And you want to have this flourishing, supportive environment. Think about the idea of like games and activities, the design of your classroom, seating in the classroom. These are all very important to creating a nourishing and helpful environment. And the end result is autonomy plus competence plus relatedness. These come into this idea of motivation. Autonomy, meaning students have their own personality, they have their own voice in their writing. Competence, being able to improve over time, all right? Mastery, as we often call it, and then relatedness. There has to be some sort of connection. Lesson 1 and lesson 2 and lesson 3 and lesson 4, there needs to be some cohesiveness and connection there, not disjointed, okay? And when you put these three things together, this is intrinsic motivation. This very much helps to engage students, to motivate them, to make them want to attend your next class. And that's intrinsic motivation. Extremely strong, extremely powerful. All right, so most people seem to have this idea that assessment has no purpose other than getting a mark. I would argue that's no longer the case, right? So over here on the left side, we see traditional assessment, sort of selecting a response. It's contrived, it's not very realistic. It's recall or recognition only, so memorization essentially. It's teacher structured. Think about this. This type of assessment, this type of teaching is when the teacher stands at the front of the class and everybody looks at the teacher, right? And it also uses indirect evidence, so that's snapshot. Authentic or 21st century assessment, on the other hand, this is sort of how we can perform a task, right? Rather than an exam, it's actually examining what we can do, okay? It's much more realistic, authentic, real life. It involves construction plus application, not just memorization. It is student-centered rather than teacher-centered, and it uses direct evidence of what students can do rather than indirect evidence. And when I say direct evidence, I'm going to talk about this more later, but this is ideas such as perhaps portfolios, which track progress over time rather than a single snapshot in time, which would be sort of a traditional assessment. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so let's talk about feedback for just a moment. Who gives feedback? That's a very good question. I like to stagger feedback between self, like checklists. I don't know if you've ever done checklists. I do a simple checklist for first stage of writing. Do I have a thesis? Do I have a hook? Do I have a transition here? Check, check, check. And if the answer is no, whoops, I have to go back and revise that and change it, right? Next stage, stage 2 for me, is peer feedback. Now you have a partner, you swap papers, you look at each other's papers. I use a guided peer review where I give them a form and they read each other's papers and fill it out. This is really helpful. If you just do an open peer review and say, read your partner's papers and correct the mistakes, you're looking for disaster. It's going to blow up in your face. But if you do a guided peer review and you give them a paper and say, use this structure, use this paper to evaluate what you're reading, it's going to be much more useful. And of course, we have to do something as teachers. We have to earn our paychecks, don't we? This is teacher feedback. So this is when it comes to sort of the grammatical, punctuation, spelling, format of the essay, and so on. So what is self-feedback? Really quickly, this can be done with checks, guides, or structured reading. It's informed by the lesson goals. Some examples may be something like, did I include a thesis? Yes or no, circle. Oh, yes, I have a thesis here. I'm going to find it in the paper and circle it. Do I have a transition here between the first and second paragraph? Nope, I don't have one. Oops. Now I have to go back and add one. Okay. Do all subjects and verbs agree? Go through and read through. And if I say I goes, oh, subject verb agreement. Whoops, I need to change that. So this is what we call noticing. And most students can correct their own work with a little bit of noticing, but that's our job to help them to notice. Easy way to do it is just to have a checklist like this. All right. Last one, something like this. I like to use reporting verbs in a lot of my essays. So did I use action verbs only? Do I have at least 5 reporting verbs, right? Students go through and check, and oh, I only have 3. I need to add a couple more. So some very simple ways to do self-feedback. And again, that's what I do for the first stage of editing. Next, after we have done the self-review, the self-feedback, and some revision, the next step is peer feedback. I like to use the tag method. Tag method is quite simple. It's telling something positive. So starting with something positive, this is really good, I like this. Then asking. So this is when you are criticizing, critiquing somebody, finding mistakes, but instead of saying, you do this wrong, right? Oh, you have a grammar mistake here. You say something like, how about doing this? So you're offering criticism, but without being harsh. Then giving suggestions. I think you could do this. If I were you, I would do this, right? This is suggesting. It's more critical feedback, but instead of being direct and perhaps negative, it's a much more positive way to give corrective feedback. Right? And then after that, we have one more stage of revision. And then that last draft comes to the teacher. Now, teacher's job. We give corrective feedback. We look at grammar, spelling, punctuation, structure, all those things. Typically, we mark directly on the document. Like if it's a paper, we mark with red pen, right? If we do it online, we can use something like Google Docs or even Word, Microsoft Word to make comments and correct things. We have to make suggestions for improvement, but we also should praise. I like to use the sandwich method, positive, negative, positive, sandwiching the critique in between the two good parts. I like to make notes in the margin on the sides here, mostly focusing on structure, word choice, and so on. I like to say, oh, excellent vocabulary here, or you use this word 2 times, consider changing it, something like that. And I would also encourage meeting. I like student-teacher conferences. This is a chance for more interaction. Once again, students can actually ask questions to the teachers, because most of the time students get a paper, they look at their mark, they look at their grade, they might look at a couple comments and then say, trash can, I'm done, right? If you include some sort of meeting and allow the students to ask questions, then they keep that paper, they engage more, they interact more. You can do this outside of class, but I like to do it in class personally. During a writing activity, perhaps say, okay, this group over here, why don't you come on up? You can ask questions to me now, right? And rotate it around. That's the most efficient way that I have found to do it. If you have other ideas, that's great, but conferences are really helpful. And this is just something called the rigor meter. This is sort of vocabulary you can use in the purple, depending on your goal. But these are some great verbs to think about. And I also use these, give these to my students to use. But these are just some really excellent ideas based on Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, educational technology. What kind of technology do we typically use in class? PowerPoint, here's one. Google Meets, Zoom, these are all technologies we're using today probably. How can we do writing with modern technology? This is a big issue. Learning management systems like Canvas, Moodle, Schoology, online methods like Google Docs, I like to turn on review and suggestion mode. You can actually do that in Google Docs by going in and making comments. You can do suggestion mode, and then everything will show up in like pink or green, and the students can actually see all the changes that you've made. You can make corrections this way. You can also make comments. And I like to keep a side document with common feedback phrases, and then I can copy and paste it in. Then I don't have to type everything all over again. Like great vocabulary, copy and paste. If you use Google, it'll actually create a bank for you, and it will know your common phrases, and you can just click on that and insert it. Really, really helpful. E-portfolios are a great way to teach. I use portfolios a lot in my writing classes. Doing it online is much easier than paper. Here's an example. This is actually a paper that I corrected with a student just last week. You can see all my comments in red here. And not only that, they can see on the right hand in the margin what I have corrected. I've corrected spelling here. I've also made some positive comments. Great intro, great thesis, right? And then I make a comment, try to avoid using the same word here. We can see however used 2 times. So some simple little comments like this and corrections. This is a great way for students to see what you're doing rather than pen and paper. Okay. So that brings us to portfolios. These are time-tested portfolios, traditional portfolios. We can still use them, but we need to update them a bit. In a traditional way, we write, revise, and then turn in a final draft. An updated portfolio would be sort of a PBL or TBLT. By PBL, I mean project-based learning. So creating a project, taking steps each week or each class, taking little steps to achieve that project. That's a really great way of interactive learning. TBLT is task-based language teaching. This is when you have one task per class or per unit. A task might be something like writing an email to a colleague, or a task might be something like offering criticism or critique to a boss, right? Writing up something. So this would be a task. These are really effective ways of teaching TBL and TBLT, which is why you hear these a lot these days. Using e-portfolios, you can manage daily or unit tasks and start to compile them. And over time, students will engage with the portfolios and they're going to see what they have worked on. And at the end of the class, they're going to see, I basically wrote a book in this class. Oh my gosh, I did so much work. And it's a really great way to instill more of that motivation. All right, components of a portfolio. Portfolios are about process, not product. I would definitely emphasize that. It's not about the final product, but the steps along the way. Process-based writing portfolios typically have 3 parts, what's called a passport. This is how students connect to life experiences, something like brainstorming at the very first stage. That should be included. Biography. This is how things have changed. So assessment, feedback, revision, draft number 2, draft number 3, and so on. And then the dossier. This is more about the final product. So this essentially goes from the passport, first stage, to the final draft and all the stages in between. That's what makes a good portfolio, not only the final draft. Okay. Portfolios require a lot of planning. We got to have a plan for something like assessment, like a rubric, how or what should be included. We also have to think about platforms, paper, online, etc. I put together some guides and documents here. So if you scan this QR code, you can open a Google Drive where I have placed a lot of documents. Feel free to use any of these documents. You can download them and use them in your own classes as much as you like. Okay, so let's talk about some resources very quickly, and then we'll sort of wrap it up here. Okay, resources. Traditional texts, these are sort of outdated. They need revising. We have to vary text activities for students' needs. We have to update our text constantly to meet new demands. Really, really important here. We have to use existing texts with a twist for increased engagement. And I'm going to explain what that means in just a moment. So, what is an engaging text? All right, a traditional text is sort of open the book, read it, blah, 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 Shakespeare, very interesting, right? An engaging text has a few hallmarks. Number 1 is that it should be based around a project-based work. Okay, again, collaboration with students, not just the teacher standing at the front explaining things, but opening up the classroom and requiring students to work with one another. It needs to be a realistic usage of the target language. Whatever it is that you're focusing on, it needs to be realistic, not some abstract, silly thing that they're never going to use. You need to have an appropriate use of academic language. Academic language is hard for second language learners or third language learners or fourth language learners, as many of our learners may be. We have to make it digestible, understandable. We have to break it down, okay? We can't just throw students to the wolves here and say, write a perfect essay with perfect language. The text needs to be understandable. If there's a new phrase or an idiom, we need to break it down and explain it as best we can. Okay. Number 3, last one here, how do we incorporate these hallmarks into our teaching and the thinking of that cycle of revision with writing? Right? Let's talk about that. Number 1, vary your activities. Don't do the same thing every day, day in and day out. That's boring. Students will not buy in. You are not going to get intrinsic motivation with this. Okay? Think of using CLT, communicative language teaching. This is a very hot topic right now, and for good reason. A lot of teachers seem to think CLT is only for speaking classes. That's not true. All language classes, all activities can incorporate CLT. And research indicates that CLT actually is the best way to acquire, not just to remember, language. It leads to a greater uptake, according to most research over the last 20 years or so. It allows for higher order thinking skills instead of memorization. If you think about Bloom's taxonomy, which I'll show in a minute, memorization is at the bottom. That's the easiest thing to do. The very top order of thinking skills is sort of producing, extrapolating, analyzing. Those things are much more difficult. We should be doing that more in class. Okay? So here is Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom, if you don't know, is an educational psychologist. He came up with this idea from knowledge to evaluation. At the bottom is the easiest thing to do, and the very top is the hardest thing to do. However, the more things at the top we do, the more students will acquire and actually remember things. So analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, this is where we should be focusing our teaching more. Application, comprehension, and knowledge, those are things that can happen without the teacher. We don't really need to focus on that in class. All right, so how do we incorporate this in a writing class? A traditional classroom looks like this. You read the model text, then you write an essay, you answer the questions, so on, right? Okay, I read this, that's what an essay looks like. Now I write down. It's boring, it's repetitive. It uses uninteresting and unrealistic texts. This lacks intrinsic motivation. You will not get buy-in from learners here. On the other hand, with CLT, you use engaging texts and you use interaction. You incorporate the 4 skills. By 4 skills, I mean reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And you meet your learners' needs so that it's not boring for them. And this leads to more intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic being things like curiosity, enjoyment, happiness. Those things are going to engage your learners, and it's going to get much more motivation and much more buy-in from our learners. All right, so some recommendations here. I would say teach grammar and teach the language explicitly. I know a lot of teachers who say, I only use English in the classroom. I think with grammar, it's fine to teach in the first language. There's no problem with that. It's probably much easier for students to understand. Do not avoid using the first language in English classroom. Note the grammar points so students can see how it's used in a sentence. If you just give a definition, for example, of a grammar point or a vocabulary point, that's very abstract. But if you put it into a sentence, students are going to remember how to use it more. Make sure to model it as much as you can so students know what they're doing. They have a reference. They can say, I forgot, how do I use this word? Oh, there it is. That's how I use it in a sentence. Awesome. Great. Lead activities where students can actually use the language in a realistic way. Use it in their writing, right? Put this idiom into your essay right now. You can put it here, right? That's much more realistic than memorize this and use it in a way that nobody's ever going to understand. I also like to have students create many of their own activities. I might say, write three ideas down on a piece of paper, collect the papers and say, okay, we're gonna do activity 1 now. It's a great way to get buy-in. And last, give students plenty of time and exposure to explore the new language, all right? This goes back to the very first slide here. We don't give enough time for students to explore the language and to understand it. Okay, so on the left side here, we see a more traditional method of reading and writing teaching. Here's an essay, now read it, answer the questions, or write a response. In CLT, it's much more engaging. So I like this picture here because the student can actually see him or herself in this text and can actually engage with it more. And that's the motivation we want. Here are some guides I put together. Once again, if you scan this code, there's a Google Drive folder I've put together with some ideas for communicative language teaching. A lot of these come from the US government, the Department of Education, because I do a lot of work with them. And we create free guides. You are open, you are available, these are available for anybody to use. Print them, use them in your classroom. They are meant to be used. There's no copyright on any of these documents that I'm sharing with you. These are all open sourced. Please use them, edit them, change them as you please. Okay, so how do we use these texts? This will be my last part here. All right, Jigsaw. If you've never used Jigsaw, it's a great way to structure text. That's when you take an essay, for example, if you have a 5-paragraph essay, and you cut it up into the introduction, body 1, body 2, body 3, conclusion. You mix it up among the group, and you say, reconstruct the essay, for example. That's a jigsaw. Read and run. This is a great way for learners to use physical activity, especially if you're teaching younger learners, primary, middle, high school. They can use physical activity to problem solve and acquire information. So what I do is I keep a reading in the classroom with 1 leader per group, and the other members of the group, they have to go outside where there's a document hanging on the door usually. They have to read it 1 sentence at a time, come back, repeat the sentence, and the person sitting at the desk has to write it down. This requires memorization, muscle memory from moving around, and communication. It's a much better way than just to read and write and read and write. Another great activity I use with my learners is to write around the room. And this is when learners collaborate to write a story or essay. So this is when you can hang multiple, let's say, topic sentence for each paragraph around, and each person writes 1 sentence, and then they rotate to the next one and write a sentence, and rotate to the next one and write a sentence. And then at the end, you're gonna have a beautiful paragraph or an essay that's actually composed by everybody in the classroom. It's a really beautiful way to write, and it's a great way to explore the same idea, but different students' take on it. It's really fun. I would also incorporate some ideas of adaptive texts. How can you explain a text without just reading it, acting it out, doing other things, creating a dialogue with it? That's a great way. Realia is also a great way. By realia, especially if you're teaching young learners, bringing things in from outside the classroom. I use this one on the right with teaching adjectives of touch and sensation. And we actually had students bring in things. What is fluffy? And they brought in a cotton ball. What is sticky? A student brought in a piece of tape, right? These are really great for especially young learners or beginner level learners. All right, so if we already have a textbook, for example, do we have to throw it away? No, you can actually use that same text in class and update it. They need some revising, that's it. There's lots of online resources to update text, and I would say every 2 to 3 years, update your text. I was recently teaching a class where one of the essay prompts was to write about cassette tapes. My students don't even know what a CD is, much less a cassette tape. If I'm talking about music, I can't talk about CDs and cassettes. I'm talking about streaming music online, for example, right? I have to update that. There's some great web-based resources to get ideas. There are free worksheets out there, some that I've already shared with you. There's some fantastic websites. A few websites I use every day are ISL Collective, One Stop English, and mesenglish.com. These three are fantastic places where there are literally thousands, perhaps millions of worksheets available with lots of reading and writing activities. These are completely free. You can sign up or you can just download them. Really, really great activities. All right, and that brings me to my last point, gamification. And this is a scary word for so many writing teachers. The writing classroom should not be fun. Yes, it should. I definitely believe writing can be fun. All right, last here, gamification. I feel like so many teachers, especially writing teachers, we are resistant to fun in the classroom. Why? Fun means intrinsic motivation. We want students to enjoy class. Yes, we have to learn, but learning can be enjoyable. All right, games are free. They can be made quickly. Repetition is key to acquisition, but it tends to be very boring. Repeat after me, A, B, C, A, B, C. However, gamification does the same thing, repetition again and again, but it makes it a fun way. Games can also address all the learning styles. VAK, if you're not familiar, V meaning visual learners, A, audio learners who learn by hearing, and K, kinesthetic, people who learn by touching and doing. And games can be structured for all levels and all abilities. You can use one game and break it down from beginner to advanced. And if you have multiple levels in your classroom, which I always do, I have some intermediate and some advanced in my class right now, I can create 2 levels of board games, depending on their level and ability. Games are free and they're really fun, and they also take the learning out of the teacher's hands and create autonomy with the students, which is one of those intrinsic motivating factors. Millions of resources exist out there. Don't be afraid to use them. Okay. Games can be played online or in person, right? Teachers can gamify pretty much any lesson these days. And I would consider, for me, I always invest in a few resources: scissors, paper clips, a copy machine or a printer, and a laminating machine. I don't actually have a laminating machine, but I use box tape, clear box tape, and I can create cards out of paper. And if you put that box tape on them, you can use those cards again and again every class, instead of using paper, which tends to be worn down, it breaks down, students write on it. But if it has that clear surface on it, you can reuse them for years and years to come. So it's a cheap alternative to lamination. And box tape is pennies for a small roll. All right, repetition in action. What does gamification do that we can't do elsewhere in the class? Well, we can actually incorporate text in different ways. Written text can be used for reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills. Okay, written texts don't only need to be for writing. You can create a dialogue from the text, right? I use this a lot with books when I'm reading books with students and we're doing more like literature. We create texts into dialogue, and that's so much fun. Students get to buy in, and then I'm saying, what is this character thinking? What is he thinking here? Oh, they can actually create their own ideas, and they're engaging with the text much more. Then when they're writing, they're thinking, what is my character going to say? Why? How does he feel? How does she feel? There's much more engagement than just writing down words or reading words. Role plays, another way to engage with the text in a very different way. This is what I call the text with a twist. Using the same text that you've used for 20 years maybe, but using it in a different way. Acting out the text. I might say to students, here's an essay, here's a piece of literature, a short story, for example. Act it out in 3 minutes without words. Oh my gosh, students have to understand the text more in order to act it out. And the more they understand the reading, the more they can produce in their writing, right? Lots of connection here. All right. I touched on learning styles a bit, so I would like to just sort of explore this before we get into the next point. Games in class, there's always this question of why? Why do I need to use them? For one, learning styles require multiple engagements, right? Multiple ways of engaging. Think about VAK, visual, audio, kinesthetic. How else can teachers address student needs? Games are a great way to do it, all right? Everybody has a different brain and a different structure of your brain, and we all learn in different ways. I happen to be a visual learner, right? I have friends who learn by listening, audio learners, and I have friends who can't learn unless they're actually putting their hands on something, kinesthetic, right? When we're teaching, are we really teaching to all three of these learning styles? Or are we only teaching to one? Most of us teach only to visual learners. That's not very helpful to other types of learners. So with visual learners, you can engage easily with text. You can use pictures, video, audio learners, recordings. The teacher can talk, peers can talk. Kinesthetic learners, this is much more hands-on, right? Playing a game, rolling the dice, moving a piece on a game board, that's very kinesthetic. And that kind of game is going to incorporate visual, audio, and kinesthetic. So regardless of your learning style, you're actually going to get something from each game. It's not the same if you're just teaching in a traditional way where you're standing at the front and talking. If you're a kinesthetic learner, you cannot learn from watching a teacher talk at the front of the classroom. You cannot learn from reading a text. It doesn't help. Here's a sort of taxonomy of gamification. There are lots of different ways of incorporating games, lots of different types of games you can incorporate, but anything as simple as a dialogue all the way up to putting your hands on something and playing. These can all be ways of gamifying. And there's some really, really great social, personal, fictional, performance, and ecological factors to consider. These are all quite helpful to learners, especially language learners. There are also some great apps you can use. If you don't use apps in the classroom, I would definitely recommend it. Excuse me. Some useful apps are Kahoot. I don't know if anybody's ever used Kahoot. I just used it last week in my class. Students love it. It's an easy quiz game. You can either create your own or you can go online and find a quiz somebody else has made and use it. So much easier than creating your own, and it saves you so much time. Memrise. I love to use this with students. It's a way to create flashcards and vocabulary games. You can incorporate pictures, video. You can incorporate a lot of things with this, and it can be done on the phone or on a computer. Flipgrid is one of my favorites. In my writing classroom, I actually give feedback using Flipgrid. So students turn in an essay, and then they record a 1-minute video explaining what was easy or difficult in the essay for them. And then I respond to them using the same app. Oh, thanks, Jane. That was really helpful. My advice is next time, why don't you practice this? Right? Something like that. You can do pictures or videos. And the best thing is that the teacher controls the whole platform. There's nothing that the teacher cannot control. So you don't have students maybe harassing each other or talking to each other inappropriately. The teacher can actually manage everything, which is great. Some game resources here, some useful sites and materials. I said MES English earlier. MES is Mark's English School. This happens to be a person I grew up with back in Oklahoma, where I'm from, and he now works as a teacher in Japan. He's a computer programmer and a software developer, and he has created amazing, completely free software where you can make puzzles, games, and activities. This is my #1 game resource. I love this website. I've been using it for 15 years and I still love it. It's good for children. It's good for adults, every level, every ability. I can't say enough. It's really engaging, very colorful, especially for young learners. They like it. You can create games, flashcards, board games, lots of different activities. bogglesworldesl.com is another great one. You'll see some examples that I'll show you in a minute that I use from there. It's another free site for games. You can create great worksheets and activities. I would say for worksheets, this is perhaps number 1 or maybe number 2 for activities. If you don't have this book, it's a book that I would definitely recommend purchasing or getting a hold of in a library. The Practice of English Language Teaching by Jeremy Harmer. I was lucky enough to have Mr. Harmer as my professor in graduate school, but this is just one of the best books for classroom activities. It is hundreds of pages of how to use activities in class. It's great for communicative language teaching. I recommend it highly. American English, this is what I was talking about earlier, americanenglish.state.gov. BBC also has a great BBC Learning English website. American English I like because they have all these free activities and lesson plans from the United States Department of Education. This is where I have spent some time in the past as a fellow creating resources. So a lot of my resources you'll see, you'll also find here on the DOE website. All right, here's an example of a game board that I use. It's an empty game board. So you can literally write in or print in anything you want on each of these squares. So if I'm doing a game like this, I can incorporate grammar here. My students are having a hard time with past tense. I create a game board like this one on the right. This is from Boggles World, by the way. I downloaded it. And you say something like this. You roll the dice. Everybody starts on the first square. You roll the dice. Whatever you land on, you have to make a sentence in the past tense with it, right? So if I land on number 2, for example, I could say I played baseball. And then if you look in the middle of the board, there's time. I played baseball last month, last week, 2 months ago, yesterday, whatever you may be. All right. These are great ways, sentence stems, scaffolding that you're supporting your learners, but they're producing amazing grammar and vocabulary. And it's fun. There's competition. I usually give a little prize at the end, like a piece of candy or something. Intrinsic motivation here. Here are some resources and guides for creating games that I have put together. If you would like to access these materials, you can download the QR code here, scan it, and you should be able to open a Drive folder with lots and lots of activities and some articles as well for how to create a good, effective game for the writing classroom. All right, I'm gonna have some closing thoughts here, and then I'm gonna open it up to some questions and answers. All right. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. William Butler Yeats, around 1939. So often I think we have this idea of learners are like a pail, a bucket, and we're putting information in, right? We're filling it up. Actually, learning is much more creating a passion within our students. So you see that candle burning? That's our job as a teacher. We are igniting the passion in our learners, and we are helping to not just fill their minds with information, but teaching them how to think, how to solve problems, how to do things not only in the classroom, but out of the classroom as well. Right? Whenever you talk to those students 20 years down the road who you've taught, and they say they remember you, it's not that they remember you for something, piece of information you taught them. They remember something you did for them in the classroom, which was much deeper. All right, and the very last point here, remember our 21st century skills: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, information literacy, media literacy, technology literacy, flexibility, leadership, initiative, productivity, and social skills. How many of these skills have we now talked about in this little talk today? I would say all of them. So by incorporating 3 simple steps into your classroom, hopefully into your writing classroom, you can incorporate all of these 21st century skills. You're going to create more productive members of our society, students who are more productive in their learning, and you're going to create a much better future for these students because these are things they will take with them in life outside of class. All right, so I think we can take a little time for some Q&A. And really quickly, if you would like to write down my information, I'm happy to correspond by email. You can also find me on Facebook. sh3936@tc.columbia.edu is my email. I'm very happy to correspond with people. If you have any questions or any other ideas to give me, I would love to hear them. Now, I've also put some references and resources here for further reading. If you would like to access any of those, I would be happy to share this PowerPoint with you. All right, I'm going to stop sharing here. And I'll turn it over to see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, sir. The meeting is now open for discussion. I guess we have a few questions in the chat box.
Okay.
Yes, one question is from Ms. Nathu Kumari. What are the efficient ways to engage the learners without any classes, just with assignments or tasks? What kind of tasks or assignments would be helpful?
Excellent. That's a very good question. So I would say, even outside of class, you can give really structured materials for learners. You can give things, I actually often ask my learners to create their own. So create your own worksheet, create your own outline or guide. So even with writing in mind specifically, even without classroom, you can very easily structure things. So with the writing class, I would say something like, okay, when we meet on Tuesday, I would like you to have 4 ideas for your essay, for your writing. And then next, all right, I want you to choose one of these points and I want you to create an outline, a 5-paragraph outline. Right? Then next stage, all right, I want you to write an introduction with these parts. Right? These are things you can do outside of the classroom where you're engaging the learner, where the learner is doing a lot more to sort of independently learn. These are great ways that you can structure things, and I would encourage conferencing, whether by email, online, or face-to-face, but conferencing with students and supporting them.
Yes, thank you, sir. We have another question from Ms. Rama Jayarajan. Can you suggest any gamification strategy for traditional classroom setup to engage students actively?
Oh yeah, sure. I think for me, I'm a big board game fan. So I take an empty board game. I have a laminated board and I just write in on the squares. But one of the best ways I would say do it, if you can laminate a board game, keep it with you. I've had the same one, by the way, since 2007. I'm still using it. So laminated board games will last you a long time. It's a large one. I think it's A3 size or A2 size paper. And I laminated it. And what I do is I actually give it to students and say, create your own questions. Another way is to say, from let's say a reading or from a writing standpoint, you're going to write questions for somebody else in the class to answer, right? So you're turning over the teaching to the students and they're doing some of this teaching, and then you're going to be able to measure what they're able to do as well as their knowledge. But it's a much more engaging way. So I would say allowing the students to do the work, whatever it may be, creating board games with their own questions. If you have a group of students, each person make 2 questions and fill in a board game, for example. Design your own board game, make your own questions. And what is the teacher doing? We're observing, we're filling in where we need to, but it's all communicative, and we're simply managing and facilitating, but not actually leading things in a traditional way.
Yes. And we have another question from Mr. T.H. Lawrence. Could you please make the concept of U-shaped classroom design a little more lucid?
Sure. So a U-shaped design is when the front of the classroom, so you're going to have like the desks are going to be in a U, and the front of the classroom, where the blackboard would be, that's the opening of the U, right? So the idea is essentially a couple things. Number one, in a traditional classroom, the teacher is at the front of the class and everybody's facing the blackboard and the teacher. In a U-shaped design, students are going to be facing not only the teacher, who is going to be walking in the middle of the U, but they're also going to be facing across to one another. And this creates more engagement. The second thing is the teacher then is able to look at everybody's work as they're writing. So you can actually go to each person, and you can do a double U as well, a U inside of a U. And then the teacher can walk around, and then you can engage with everybody rather than a traditional classroom where you're walking way back in the corner and here and in the front and in the back. Everything's in a U. It's really accessible. Also, nobody can hide, right? When you have those students who sit at the back and maybe put their head down on the desk, you don't have that with a U-shaped design. So creating that horseshoe type shape, putting maybe, if you have 25, 30 students, maybe 12 students in one row, 18 students in the row behind into double U shape. It's just so much more accessible. And then the teacher walks in the middle of the U. And if students have a question, you can stop and address and help them. You can also observe everybody's writing at the same time. It's just more easy to get around than a traditional classroom. Hopefully that's clearer.
Yes, it's clear. Thank you very much.
Yes, no problem.
We have another question from Mohammed Nasib. Do you have any eliciting, Do you have any eliciting techniques to make the students get more interested in the topic you teach?
Oh yeah, of course. So I would say getting students interested is the very first step we should take, and we shouldn't stop. We have to continue eliciting from students to get them engaged. So first thing is, know your students. Elicit from them in the very first class. I like to do this at the beginning of a semester or school year. What do they like? So I create a little note card. I have students write information on a note card for me. And what they do is they write down their name, gender, maybe where they come from. And then I have them write down like 3 facts about themselves. And these 3 facts typically will be something like something everybody knows about you, something about hobbies and interests. And then the third thing I always say, tell me something unique or interesting that nobody else in the classroom knows about you, right? Now you're engaging, you know what students are interested in, and you're going to create activities around that, right? And so then you can ask this, you can elicit very quickly. I actually keep on a chain, on a little key in the middle, and I have the note cards there, and I keep them in my hand for the first few classes, and I say, oh, Johnny, I remember you like baseball. So, and then you can ask a question to elicit like this. So knowing students' interests, backgrounds, where they come from, things like this, that's a great way to elicit. And I would say the very first step would be to know your learners as well as you can. Then you can elicit more information from them.
Thank you, sir. We have one last question from Ms. Bhargavi. Can you please come up with a few ways of using flashcards for vocabulary?
Sure. So vocabulary is a really important topic that I think we don't address enough in our teaching. And I like Memrise because it's a digital flashcard creator, but any type of flashcard is fine. I think for flashcards, we tend to focus so much on vocabulary and like definitions. I would say we need to focus more on language use. How to use that term, that grammar, whatever it may be. So I do 2 things. Number 1, if you're going to create a flashcard, you can use a formal definition, but I like to use students' own definitions in their own words. So rather than me saying the definition of essay is a collection of paragraphs in a cohesive. Okay, that's boring, right? An essay is paragraphs you write, things you write, and in order to achieve something such as this, this, and this. Have students create their own definitions. They're going to memorize it and remember it, and they're going to engage with it more. Number two, don't just use words. Why not use pictures on flashcards? Even for grammar, there are a lot of visual learners who will learn more from pictures, and that's okay. Why don't you allow them to create their own flashcards with vocabulary and things? Mnemonic devices help us to remember. So if I say something like horse, horse, giraffe, 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 long-necked horse, I can have a picture of a horse. Oh, that's also reminds me of a giraffe. Oh, and a zebra. And so there are lots of ways to do this. The last thing I would say is, if you've never used what we call word bubbles, that's a great way to create flashcards. Word association. Again, let's take the word horse. You put horse in the middle. On the outside, you put all the words that you know that are connected to horse. Ride, a horse, for example. Zebra, right? Similar to a horse. Giraffe, a cousin of a horse. Feed a horse. Raise a horse. Something like this. Farm, horse, farm. Any words that you connect. This is creating what we call a word web. Between the bubbles, there's a creation of a word web. This actually leads, research indicates, this leads to long-term word memorization, vocabulary memorization, much better than just memorizing a definition. So instead of having just a card with definition on one side and a word on the other, think about using some other ways to, more about language use than just memorization.
Yes, we seems to have covered all the questions from the participants. I think we may wind up the session now. Thank you, sir, for such a very interesting session on how to create opportunities for success by rightly engaging the learners in a classroom. I'm sure all our participants have been benefited by the session. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, sir. We are winding up the first session. I request all the participants to fill up the feedback form. We may take a short break and come back at 4:30 for the second session. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sean. So it was a very interesting, fruitful session.
Thanks so much. And perhaps I can send you the PowerPoint and you can share, because I put a lot of links in there.
I shall do that. Yes.
Yeah, that would be excellent. And if anybody has questions, please feel free to contact me, email me anytime.
You're very kind of you. Thank you very much.
No problem. All right. Have a great rest of your day. It's nice seeing you.
See you.
Good evening to all. We are entering the second session of the day. For this session, we are honored to have Dr. Malati as our resource person. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you for joining us today. Dr. P. Malati has 17 years of experience in the field of teaching and training students in communication and soft skills. She is a certified trainer of soft skills and TOEFL. Currently, she is working as the head of the Department of English in JJ College of Engineering and Technology at Trichy. Dr. Malati has edited the book The Old Man and the Sea, which is recommended as a non-detailed book for the affiliated colleges of Bharatdasan University. She has published more than 25 papers in communication skills and the role of teachers in international and national journals. I gladly invite Dr. Malati to handle our second session on the topic, the unique art of language teaching. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. So good evening, all the participants. And at the outset, I want to thank Dr. Justin James, English Language Center, University of Technology, Sultanate Foreman. And I thank Principal Dr. S. Maggie Jose, Convener Bindu Ann Philip, and Coordinator Mrs. Jancy James. Thank you all for this great opportunity to present the unique art of language teaching. So just I want to share the PPT. So let us start our session, and the topic that I have taken is the unique art of language teaching. So before we start the unique art, first let us see, is the teaching an art or a science? Okay, so if we think of the art, there is much room for innovation, and there can be much room for designing of our own thoughts. Okay, but if it is a science, then that should be a rigid one, and you have to prove that. So that's why most of the research tells that 94.1% of the research tells that teaching is an art and not a science. Okay, so if we come to the conclusion that the teaching is an art, then what kind of teaching that we can adopt, or what kind of art that can be adopted to teach the language is another question, right? So when we think of the art, when we decide the teaching methodology or teaching process or our style of teaching, then we have to decide the main part of it, that is which art should be adopted. So before we think about the art or the design, how we have to do the language teaching, all the language teachers has to do the self-realization, because before we decide the process or the design or the art of teaching, first we must know the self-realization. We must know about us. First, we have to think deep into it, and we must realize what are all the strengths for us and what are all the things can be adopted to teach the language. That we have to do it. When we do the self-realization, then we will identify our own talents, and with that, on the basis of that talents, we can make the design of art of teaching. Okay, so if you see the picture here, it is an elephant and the ox, but the interrelation of these two animals' head makes the unique art. Like that, we have to make an interrelated art of teaching then only we can reach the students very easily and we can motivate them also. So look at these two personalities. Both are good in language. And one is in a preacher and another one is in a leader, successful leader. So how they become a notified person or how they become a celebrity because of their language, but not only with the language, the way they have delivered it. Okay, the way that they have delivered their speech make them a celebrity. So that's why we have to make our own strength. So with that, the teacher first do the self-realization and get all the strength of her, then only he can make the design. So while we doing the design, what are all the things are, while we design the art of it, what are all the things that we have to make it over that? See, first, now we are all in a corona period. That is a pandemic period, worldwide pandemic period it is. So in that situation, that it is a black swan. Okay, it is a black swan movement. So actually what the black swan, that unforeseen event that changes everything is upon us. So it was more of catalyst for the online education and other educational technological tools than decades of the self-serving corporate exorations. It seems safe to say that this will not only be disruptive, but also paradigm change. So in this change, this pandemic period or this corona period, we can take it as a paradigm change. So all the teachers and the students are pushed into the digital world. So when the students get into it, nowadays the students are very good in digital knowledge, but when the teachers are pushed into it, first they have to learn about the technology. First, they have to plan the lesson. Then that lesson has to be taken in a digital format. Then, while doing that digital format, they have to do many spad works first, and then they have to decide it the way they have to teach that particular topic. So while we decide all the things, what the students will do it, they will do the prior work. So the prior work, if they search in a Google or in a YouTube, they will get more things from for that topic, particular topic. So if they are prepared well, and if they ask the question to us, then we must be well versed with the topic with the technological knowledge. Okay, so in that case, the role of the teacher has changed as a facilitator. So in this digital world or digital native students classroom, we cannot be the teacher. We have to be the facilitator. When they ask some questions or when they make any doubts of the subject, then we have to clarify those things. No need to give the full explanation as what we do in the conventional classrooms. So how the facilitator or how the teacher has to behave is, the one side they must know about the language and the language knowledge, okay, and the skills. And then the other side, we must be well versed with, we have to handle all the technologies. So all the tools we must know it. Of course, in the language lab, communication lab, we are all using all the technologies, but it was separated as a laboratory work. Now the classroom, the language itself become a technological teaching. So we must be well versed with this technology. And then see here, that is what is the role of the teacher is a shift from conventional to a modern teacher. So in the conventional teacher, they read out only the concepts and they provide notes and expect children to just listen to the lesson, and they have to manage, they are managing their class very well, and they never acknowledge the mistakes. This is a conventional way of teaching a language or the teacher. And as a facilitator, now the role is changed as a facilitator. So if we become a facilitator, then we must know and we must engage in discussion with the children, and design activities for forge collaboration, and encourage out of box thinking, and the facilitator forge collaboration, create a further leaders, and treat mistakes as a part of learning process. So this is a major difference from the teacher and the facilitator. So being a facilitator, first we must know the mentality of the students, because a few of the students are outspoken and a few of them are never open their mouth. That is an introvert and extrovert students are in our class. So that time how we have to handle them, that we have to take care of them. So what happened to the attitude of the digital native students is, that is they want instant feedback, because they are not living in a letter or a telegram period. They are living in an email period, that is a digital world. So the students want to connect with the world instantly and expect the same in education learning process too, because they are having that facility in their social life. So they are expecting the same in the educational line also, and they interact differently. So in the conventional period, the teacher teach the class, and the students arise the doubts and the teacher clarifies. But here we are not having the personal classroom, so the students prefer to connect via email and media and to text messages. So when they connect with us through this digital, we have to be prompt with the clarifying answers. And the next one, they have to say in their education. There is a digital students believe that learner-centered approach should be used to regulate learning process. Learner center means they have to learn everything by activities, by doing tasks. They want to learn everything. So online course evaluation allow decision makers to collect feedback from the students. This is the main difference from the conventional and the digital classes, because the students gives their feedback, and they prefer an interdisciplinary approach also, because digital learners are more likely to pursue multiple degrees and interfield or take additional classes. So they are urged to learn everything, so we have to cope up with their speed. So before we design or before we decide the art of teaching, first we must know what is a language, what is a teaching, and what is a learning. See that every presentation almost starts with an definitions. See here the language. Language is a set of human habits, the purpose of which is to give expression to thoughts and feelings. See, expression to thoughts and feelings, and especially to impart them to others. This is an autogest person. He is an educational reformist who bring the retelling technique to his classroom students, and he succeed in that event too. So what we seen in this is expression to thoughts and feelings, okay, and that has to be import to the others. That is called the language definition. And for teaching, the teaching is a form of interpersonal influence aimed at changing the behavior potential of another person. That is behavioral change potential of another person. Okay, this is about the teaching. That is, we have to change the behavior potential of our students is the main point in this definition. And about the learning, that is, learning is a modification of behavior through experience and training. This is called that's why the digital native students always expect the learner center, because they want to learn through the experience and from the training. So these are all the definitions of these three, because without these three, we cannot teach anything. So the concept of teaching and learning, how it relates, we will see it now. So teaching is a social phenomena, whereas learning is a psychological phenomena, or the teaching is a system of actions intended to induce learning, induce or motivate for the learning. Okay, the concept is like this. So once we have this concepts like this, then we have to think it over. So we have all the definitions, we have the concepts, and we have all the strength. Now we have to decide the art of teaching, what type of art that we have to adopt to teach a language. So here I have given you one slide. So one of you tell me what the appropriate name will be given for this slide. Can any one of you tell me?
Ma'am, can you please repeat the question?
So the question itself is in the slide, ma.
Okay, ma'am.
It's a word cloud.
Word cloud is the pattern. But we are talking about the language now. See, there are so many words related with one topic. Or you can name this
Non-verbal.
non-verbal.
Non-verbal teaching. No. Oh, it's already there. Sorry, ma'am.
So the common name. Of course, you can coin the name from this cloud itself. Half the way you are correct. So shall I tell? Yeah, this one is called as a non-verbal communication. Okay, so if you want to express something, that is, if you want to express the shock or your disbelief, or about your astonished, or about your professionalism, or if you want to express your stress, or if you express worthiness, truthworthiness, and if you want to express your questioning or argument, frustration, and whatever may be the thing, it may be from the facial expression, or from our gesture, or from our posture, or from our body posture itself. Okay, so whatever may be the thing, then we must know what is a non-verbal communication. Without non-verbal communication, we cannot express all these words in this cloud. Okay, can you list of it 10 expressions from this slide? Just 10 expressions. Okay, make note of it, and
Attitude.
yeah, please. One.
Attitude.
There are so many
Shock.
words. Yeah, shock.
Disbelief.
Okay, disbelief.
Anger.
Anger.
Embarrassment.
Embarrassment. Very good.
Surprise.
What? I'm not getting you.
Frustrated.
Frustrated.
Surprised,
Surprised,
fun,
Confused.
conscious,
Confused.
confused,
appreciation,
please.
appreciation, encouragement,
Encouragement. Okay, enough. So all these words cannot be expressed only with the words. Are you all agree with this? For
yes,
this, we have to accompany with the body language. Then only those connotations will get the expression. Because words gives only the connotations, but if you want to give some expression to those words, then you have to use the non-verbal communication, right? So if it is with that, then how the teacher should behave or how the teacher should design the art of teaching is that another question. Okay, so the language teacher actually the creating interest and involve the students into the learning process in the virtual classes are a great challenge for the language teacher that we accept it. But a few teachers attain success and attract the students in a virtual classes by adopting the unique art of language teaching. So while we see all those successful teachers, what they are doing it in their classes is these passionate teachers creates more impression through non-verbal communication in the virtual classes than knowledge of the subject matter and the fluency. The body language of the facial expression and body motion plays a pivotal role in the language classroom, right? So, if I talk more about this non-verbal communication, first let us see what it is. Okay, how it gives expressions to the words that we are going to see it in a few slides. See, the language becomes distinctly human through its non-verbal dimensions. So here in the non-verbal communication, that is in a personal communication, only the 7% of a spoken words given here, and the tone of voice is 38%, and the non-verbal is 55%. So while we talk or while we express, so which takes the maximum domination as 55% of non-verbal communication dominates in the interaction. Okay, so how it derivated as Dr. Albert Mahabian, he has given this derivation that is a 7-30-38-55 rule of percentage in the element of personal communication. So the Dr. Mahabian published findings indicates that spoken words only accent for 7% of the what a listener perceives. The remaining 93% of what a listener comprehends originated from the speaker's body language and the tone employed in the delivery of the words. So this we will see it in detail in the coming slides. So here what the Dr. Mahabian he did in a research is he has taken a 9 words. Okay, so the 9 words are given in the slide. In the first 3 words, they convey affinity, and the other 3 words they convey only neutrality, and the other 3 words they convey dislike. But what he did, he asked the people to read each and every word with all the 3 expressions. Okay, so when he recorded everything, he come to the conclusion that only the 7% of the word takes its meaning with the connotation, and the rest of it depends on the non-verbal communication. Okay, so I ask one of you to read these 3 words in the first one with an affinity. Can you read, one of you? Can any one of you read?
yes, ma'am, I will try.
Yeah, affinity. With the affinity, you have to read the first three words.
Honey.
Huh?
Thanks.
Hmm.
Dear.
Dear. Okay, this is an affinity. But if you say the same thing within a neutrality, how it would be?
Honey. Thanks. Dear.
Okay. And with a dislike? Honey. Thanks. Dear. So we are making some dislikes. Okay. So with the same thing, that is the words which express the dislike, that is don't, we can make it as an affinity. That is don't. Okay. And terrible. So like that, we can change the connotation into the other shades by our accents, because accents comes under the non-verbal communication. That's why he has given you the 7%, 38 and 55 percentage of interpersonal communication. Okay. Now, we know about the importance of non-verbal communication, because 93% of our communication depends on the non-verbal. So, what are all the functions of this non-verbal that we are going to say it now? Okay. So, the non-verbal communication substitutes the verbal communication, and it complements the verbal communication, accents the verbal communication, regulates the verbal, and contradicts the spoken message sometimes, and repeating the spoken messages. So these are all the main functions of the non-verbal communication. Of course, we have subtle functions are there, but these are all the main functions of it. And we will see it one by one now. See here, the first one is substitute the verbal communication. So if I ask you, do you understand? Instead of saying yes or no, you can just nod your head. If it is from up and down, then it can be yes. If it is the lateral, then it can be no. So instead of saying words, we can express without words, but we can convey the message. That is the main function of the non-verbal communication. See it here, the obvious example, a head nod and a head shake. If you nod your head, then it is yes. If you shake your head, then it is no. So without saying any word, I can understand whether you understood or not. Okay. The other one is, so if I ask you, how was the class? And if you say within this symbol, then I can understand that it is good, or you understand it, or you like it, it was nice. So I can understand by your fingers gesture, not with the words. So that's why it is called the non-verbal communication always substitutes the verbal communication. Right. This is the first function. The second function is complements the verbal communication. How it complements. See it here, the example. Of course, the picture which I given you in as an emoji, it's also express the thing which you want to tell it, and it complements. Whenever we type the message, we type it and we are adding this emojis, so that tells more significant of that particular expression. So here see, wow, that's great. I'm so happy for you. While at the same time, smiling and hugging your friend, you are using nonverbal communication to complement what you are saying. So just you can say that, wow, that's great, you can tell it. But you want to give more expressions, or you want to give your more pleasure by hugging them. Okay, because even while we congratulate someone, we used to do this. So this function of non-verbal is called as a complimenting. Okay, we are saying and we are adding some compliments also. Okay, and the next one is accent the verbal communication. See here, if I say I am very angry with you, okay, will you get this? Will you get the magnitude of it? No. But if I say it, I am very angry with you. If I give more emphasis to the very, that is, I am very angry with you, then automatically you will understand that I am very much angry with you. Okay, so that time your behavior will be different. But if I say it, I'm very angry with you, you will just look at me. Okay, but if you give emphasis to a particular word, then the magnitude of that expression will change. So this kind of voice modulation or voice pitch or voice accents, everything comes under the title of paralanguages. That we will see it in the other slides. And the non-verbal communication regulates the verbal communication. So regulates mean if you are interested with the conversation with your friend or whoever may be, and if you just lean to them and you are having a right eye contact with them, then that posture and your facial expressions will motivate them to give more information about that. Okay, so they are giving more information. They want to give you only 2 or 3 information, but when you show your interest by your body language, automatically they will give you more information about that. Okay, so this is a kind of a regulation. Another one is you are lean to them, so you show your interest. But if you are bored with that same information, or you are already known that, then automatically what you will do it, you will just see your watch. If you see your watch, and if the person watched that, then automatically he will stop talking. Okay, that's why the non-verbal communication has the functions of regulating the verbal communication. It dominates, it tells them, it gives an idea that I want to go, please stop it. Without saying any word, you can express all these things to the person to whom you are talking. Okay, so I told you that sometimes the non-verbal communication contradicts the spoken messages, right? So here, if I say, if I smile on your mistake, will you take it in a positive or in a negative side? If you take it, if you do a wrong thing, or if you are doing any stealing, and if I laugh at you, will the situation goes in a negative or a positive?
Negative.
Or if you get a 0 mark, okay, if you get a 0 mark in your paper, and I just see the paper and smile at you, how you will perceive it? Sometimes you may think that yes, you might have scored more marks. But if I give you that paper within a 0 score, then you will get confused, right? That's why it is called a contradict expressions. Sometimes non-verbal communication contradicts the verbal messages. See, in the second one, leveraging the body language at a workplace. See, you are so happy for your personal thing, okay? Or you have received a good news about your manager, okay? And he got, so take it example as your manager got a promotion, or he is transferred to some other his hometown, and you got that message from your friends. And if you want to express those things to your manager, can you give the much body language with that message? No, you cannot give it, right? Because you have to control your body language at your workplace, and that too, especially with your boss. So you have to suppress your body language. That is called a leveraging of a body language at workplace. So now we have seen about the functions of the non-verbal communication. Now just we will see the 2 main divisions of non-verbal communication. This one is Ekman-Friesen classification of non-verbal communication, and understood under 2 divisions. One is a non-verbal vocal communication. Vocal means making sounds. So pitch, I told you what the pitch, volume, and the accents, everything comes under the paralanguage because it makes a difference with the sounds. And the second division is non-verbal, non-vocal communication. Non-vocal means without sound, but only through the body. Okay, if you express, then it is called a non-verbal, non-vocal communication. So these are all the two main divisions. Now, let us see about what is a paralanguage. Paralanguage, I told you, volume, pitch, and the intonations. So all these three makes a much difference in the meaning itself. Meaning of the words or sentence. Okay, this you know it very well. And this paralanguage is called as occluses. Occluses means occul means voice, sound. Okay, so that's why it is known as an occluses. And through the occluses, it refers to how people say something, not what they say. Okay, how you are delivering, how you are telling, how you are expressing makes much change with the meaning of the particular word. So the voice communicates many different attitudes such as friendliness. That's why we have, if we refer within Dr. Mahabian, the same word with an affinity, neutrality, and with the dislike, like that you can express friendliness, hostility, superiority, submissiveness, assertiveness, and timorous or nervousness. So you can understand, you can observe all these expressions through their paralanguage, through the speaker's paralanguage. You can understand it, or you can express all your these things, all these submissiveness or nervousness, everything will be expressed through our voice. That's why this study is called as occluses. And the different voice implications and its resultant at a classroom are as follows. We are all the language teachers. So what kind of voice that we have to implement in our class, or what are all the impacts of these voice modulation that I have listed here. Okay, so whenever you want to give more realistic and catches attention, your voice should be deep sounding. Okay, so deep sounding voice always attract the attention, and lower frequency of voice denotes anger or domination. Okay, and the raised pitch of voice always express openness, and decrease in the volume of voice always tells about the inefficiency or not confident on the particular message. And speech errors are indicate lying or not complete truth. Sometimes the feeling of guilty or delivering the wrong message automatically mismatch with the word meaning. And laughter relieves not only the mind but also the muscles. So often give some jokes to your students. Definitely they will come out of the tense, then they will be ready to focus on the lesson. And the voice leading is a powerful technique, and the slow voice rate avoids sounding overtly nervous. And it is most important that fillers should not be used in the classroom. So if we want to tell something, what we will think it is, we are not sure about it, but we conceive it very, very long period. So what we will do it is, we will think, then we will make some sounds. Okay, so this kind of fillings should be avoided. We should not have any filling sounds. Okay, and silence and pause. If you give some silence or pause during your lecture, automatically students will see on you, because they were just listening to the sound, whether they understand or not. If the sound cuts, automatically they will look to us, or automatically they will get into the focusing. And then monotone is yet another voice factor practiced often in the language classroom, which gives a dull atmosphere. Because if you won't give any accent, or if you won't give any volume or any modulations in your speech, automatically that classroom, that too in a digital, definitely it will be in a dull atmosphere. So we have to give some voice modulation in the classroom. Okay, so that is about the paralanguage or the non-verbal, non-vocal communication, right? So now we are coming into the non-verbal, non-vocal communication. So here we have so many divisions. There are so many studies about the non-verbal communication. I have given the few. That is, first one is kinesics. Kinesics is the study of the body movement. Study of body movement is called as kinesics. And the second one is proximus. Proximus is study of use of a space. That's why we are calling as proxy. Okay, so proximate. And then chronemics is a study of usage of timing. And the haptics is a study of manner of touching. And oculisis is a study of eye movements. And locomotion is study of walk movements. And then objectics is a study of surrounding things. And adornment is a study of dressing sense. And atmosphere is study of environment of the classroom or environment of the facilities of the technology. If we take as a digital classroom. And the behavior of communicator is the study of manner of speech delivery. So all these comes under a non-verbal communication. But today we are going to see about a few things. So before we come into the divisions of the non-verbal, non-vocal communication, first we should see the non-verbal communication decides the nature of communication and the style of communication and perfection of communication. All these three comes by the non-verbal communication only. Let's see the kinesics. Kinesics is nothing but the study of the body movements. Okay, so what are all the body that makes some expressions? So comes under this kinesics as eye contact, facial expression, emotional expressions and display, and expression through gesture and posture. Okay, so so with the eye contact, I have given you the two divisions. One is in a 1,000-yard stare and the target stare. So if the student is really showing interest on the teaching, definitely he will have the second one, that is target one, or otherwise that student will have a direct eye contact with the teacher. Okay. See here, I have given you facial expressions. So these are all the basic facial expressions. So with that, teacher can understand what kind of the mood that the students have on the subject or how they feel it in the classroom, that everything can judged by the facial expression of the students. Okay. And the impact of kinesics of language teacher is to always reinforces. Okay, if the teacher wants to reinforce some message, then they will be stick with the kinesics and they will convey some informations and define, reinforce and provide feedbacks and regulate the flow of thing. And then gesture comes under the four main divisions. One is an iconic gesture. Iconic gesture means, see, I have given you picture here. And pointing gesture, it is pointing the direction. And the bead gesture, it is just giving beads. And the emblematic gesture is giving symbols. So all these called as gestures. And about the posture, whenever you sit in the classroom, you have to sit erect. Okay, so that gives you focusing. And about the adornment, if it is a teacher, then teacher should be within a professional dress code. If the student is there and if the school management gives a uniform, they must come with the uniform. These are all tells about the adornment. And the chronomics is, it is about while we speak, we can pass after greeting. If I say good afternoon students, then I can give a little pass. And if I can give a pass before starting in a communication. If I want to start a presentation, then I can stand a few seconds silent, okay, and pass before sentences. If I want to give a long sentence, and if I give some pass to every part of it, then you can understand the meaning carefully, sorry, very well. And pass for responses. If someone is responding to you, you can just watching them and briefing or detailing the context or concluding within the stipulated time. So if I take a teaching, then I have to conclude it within the time. Okay, these are all the things we have seen about the non-verbal communication. Now let us see about the teaching English as a second language. So what are all the things that we have to concentrate on teaching the English as a second language is? The first one is vocabulary. We have to give vocabulary study. Second one is reading and speaking. Third one, writing and spelling words. And last is the grammar, which we never give more importance to it, but it will come on our practice. Okay, it is not necessary to mug up all the rules of the grammar, and you, when you implement it, definitely you will go with some errors. Don't stick with the grammar. You just practice the language. The grammar automatically come and stick with you. Okay, first we are going to see about the vocabulary. The season, Mr. Jason also tells about the flashcards, and I think Pavitra, somebody asked, give me more way of making flashcards. Here is the another one. Parkavi, I think. Yes, Parkavi. Are you online? Parkavi? No? Okay. So here, the learning vocabulary, this is a very unique way of teaching vocabulary. So this is called nuances of a word. Okay, nuances of any verb or nuances of any action verb will gives you a rich vocabulary. Here I have given you the nuances of a word, a talk. Okay, if can you give at least 10 words related to talk? Can any one of you try? That is related to talk. Like if I say talk, then say, okay, tell. Like that, I expect words from you.
Speak,
Speak,
narrate,
encourage,
narrate,
narrate,
discuss,
discuss. Very good.
these are from our participants. Utter,
Utter.
convey,
Yeah, I have given you the list of words here. So say, tell, ask, request, command, order, debate, scold, argue, questioning, inquire, consent, permission, reproach, criticism, blame, reprimand, agree, answering. So everything, all these 20 words related to talk. That's why it is called as nuances of talk. So this way you can teach the vocabulary. So the list is all the words related to talk: chat, whisper, boastful, balder, backbite, falter, arrange, natter. So all these words also the nuances of talk. Yes? Are you all agree with this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let us see some more words. So utter already told. So gossip is there. Joking, discussion already discussed. And what is the meaning of all these words I have given you in this? You can just have a look of it. So extempo, you might have heard it, that is speak with improvise. Okay, that is well prepared. And unprepared speech is called imprompt. Imprompt. To you, you cannot tell it. Imprompt. And conference and seminar, we know it already. So the list is going. So babble. So all these words are nuances to the talk. Okay. Some more. So if a person is talking a stupid thing, then he can called as nincompoop. Okay. So the hogwash and humbug, all these words often comes in English pictures, English movie, and prattle is a baby's talk. That is maralai, we used to call it in Tamil, prattle. And poppycock, it is a senseless but a long talk. And the rubbish, we know it very well. So all these words, all these 5 slides tells about the nuances of talk. So this is about the vocabulary. The another technique of vocabulary, how we
excuse me, ma'am.
Ma'am?
Excuse me.
Yeah, please.
Slide is not visible, it seems.
Not visible?
Slides are not visible.
Oh, not visible.
Yeah.
She seems to have stopped the presentation.
No? It's going on.
Ma'am, only the last slide is not visible.
Oh, only the last slide. Is it visible now?
No, ma'am.
You may re-present.
Okay. Is it visible now? No.
Ma'am, can you please share your presentation?
Again?
Uh,
Okay, I'll do it. Yes. Is it visible?
no, ma'am.
No. Okay. I'll share again.
Ma'am, if you stop sharing and start again, then it may come, ma'am.
Okay, okay, sure.
Now.
Yeah, it's visible now.
Yes.
It is visible now.
Is it visible now?
Yes.
Thank you. So if you want to teach the word smirk, then you have to give definition of the words expression will not enough. See the definition of the smirk here. A smirk is in a kind of smile, we can tell that. But what kind of smile that we have to express in the words, then it won't reach the students. So instead of giving the sarcastic or arrogant or irritate or provoking kind of smile if we tell, then the students will confuse. Instead of that, if you give an emoji, okay, and if you express and then you tell the expression related to it, then students may understand it better than the words only. Okay. So next one. So once we see about the smirk, I have given you all the nuances of laugh. What are all the kinds of laugh that I have given you here? That is chuckle, chattle, guffaw, giggle, titter, snicker, smirk, and grin. Okay, so all these words related to laugh. And if you want to know all these things as a video, I have given you the YouTube link. If you go through that, then two guys are just showing all these kinds of laugh. Okay, you can make note of it. That is a YouTube about the nuances of laugh. You can watch that later. Okay. Next, the teaching vocabulary. We have an dictoglass. Okay, dictoglass is a technique through which you can give the students the dictation like, but it is not the dictation, but the students have to relate the words to that particular word. That is, a dictoglass is in a classroom dictation activity where learners are required to reconstruct a short text by listening and noting down keywords, which are then used as a base for reconstruction. I have given you an example here, that is oral text. So the word is morning person. Okay, if I tell you the dictoglass is a morning person, then I'll give you a few of the phrases with that. Then they have to make a reconstruction or the paragraph with that morning person. So it is given in this slide. You can just read it. So the alarm goes off at 7 a.m. I woke up, lean over and turn off. Like all these phrases, you can make them to use. By the time they will know about the concept of morning person. This is called an dictoglass. And then about the reading and speaking. So in the reading, while you read, you have to give the correct pass. That is about the punctuations. And the pace is the speed that you are making the words. Okay, so that is an eye movement. These two makes much difference in speaking and the reading. And how you can improve the speaking skill, there is a technique called shadowing techniques. So shadowing techniques is the technique which improves the speaking skills and pave the way to enhance other communication skills too. So if you watch or if you practice or if you shadowing someone's speech, then automatically you will observe the body language, the paralanguage, and the pronunciation and the way of delivery, everything you will gain it. Okay. But this technique needs learners to repeat the expert's voice with the same modulation, pitch, and accent, but it is never be a mimic. You should not do any mimic, but you have to copy every skills of that particular person with your own style. Okay, that is called a shadow techniques. So if you follow this technique, definitely we can improve our speaking style and speaking speed also. And about the writing and spelling of the words, of course, the crazy language is English. So there is a series of words which are written in a way which seems very different from other sounds. Lots of these strange silent letters due to the history of English language. Not only has it observed plenty of vocabulary from the invaders, like the French, Latin, and the Norse, but the eventual standardization of a sound in English language has meant that certain words were whistle and keeping their older form of spelling. That's why we have these words. For example, it is not a subtle, it is subtle and succumb, accent, and then the importance of teachers' behavior. Why the teacher has to behave professionally in the classroom is much more important than the subject knowledge. Why they have to behave properly is because they act as an artist. Okay, because we have adopted an art of teaching. That's why we are called as an artist, whose performance on the screen is usually observed minutely by the students. If we do very little error, that will be watched. So we must be very careful about our performance. And before we teach, we have to take enough practice, or we have to do some spade works on that particular topic. Then only we can get into the performance. Then the non-verbal communication of the teacher. I told you the functions of the non-verbal communication. The same thing, if you use it, then all the functions will be implied in the classroom by the teacher. And the teacher is the role model, because this is in a foreign language. So when you used to say some words with an peculiar sounds, then all your class students will repeat the same. So the same thing is happening in the other class, that it is the students used to tell that 11. 11 is not there, it's 11. So 11 is the spelling, and the teacher used to tell like that, and there are so many comic videos also there for the accents. So if you go wrong with the pronunciation or with an accent, then automatically students will copy that, and they won't never know that it is a wrong thing. So that's why we have to be very careful with the pronunciation. And pause and silence, I already told you, it will catch the attention of the students. Okay, so now we come to the main part of it, that is a non-verbal communication of a perfect online teacher, online language teacher. There are 9 rules. If we follow all these 9 rules, automatically we will succeed in our event. So here, eye contact to motivate. If you look at a particular student for few seconds, automatically, even if he is distracted, he'll just have a look on you. Okay, so the eye contact is more important than your body language. Okay, the consistent, engaged eye contact is essential to communicate. It's a common behavior, of course. During the video lecture or this digital teaching, we the teachers may slip away from the speaking from the screen, but it is important to stay zeroed in on our students. To give the illusion of true eye contact, be sure to look directly into the webcam. If you see constantly on the webcam, the students will think that yes, teacher is watching us. Okay, so the slip away from the camera will be avoided. And if you want to help your expression appear more natural, or if you want to express the more love to your students, you can nail your love for a family members into the wall behind the screen. Okay, so if they happen to watch those things, then that makes the people to understand that we are also lovable person. And the second rule is perfect your posture. Select a chair that helps you to sit confidently upright. Erect. Upright means erect. And keep your shoulders square, and try to use your hands when speaking. So leaning into the camera slightly will also mimic active listening on screen. If students are asking something, and if you lean to the camera, it will motivate the students to ask that. Okay, and even if they want to interact with you, slightly just lean to the camera, that will motivate the students to interact with you. And the third rule is encouraging gesture. So that is called lend your ear. That is, if you are in a real classroom, and if you smile and nodding along while others are speaking, will let them know that you are listening and engaging. Like that, you just tilt your head and lean forward and just give a posture that you are lending your ear to the students, or you are interested in their interaction. And the fourth rule is uncross your arms. Uncross means that is, if you are crossing your arms, then it tells about you are nervous, or you are not confident enough, or you are not prepared. Okay, these kind of expressions will give within a crossing of your arms. So always uncross it, then automatically you can attract the children and fix the stage. So if it is in a virtual classroom, then you have to keep your device on a table, desk, whatever may be, and in that table is the stage for you now. Then all around the properties are like props for your teaching. Okay, and then a clean and uncultured background will keep the students focused on the teaching. Don't have distractive pictures or the posters back of you. Okay, always have a plain, or otherwise what I told you earlier, that family photos with your lovable pictures. And then dress up professionally. This is most important to the teachers, because if the teacher follows the dress code, automatically the whole world of students will follow this. If we are not stick with that, then we cannot express any student to have a proper dress code. So for the teachers, the solid color in a classic style will strike a confident and a professional note. Okay, and this is same for the female also. The teachers should not have any busy printing materials. Okay, so this is the sixth rule. And about the seventh rule, remember to relax. So whatever be your experience, or whatever be your age, or whatever it may be, if you are going to give a virtual classroom on screen, then automatically there will be a little panic in everyone. So that time, what we have to do it, or what is the ritual form of on screen is just to take a 5 deep breath. That deep breath will relax you, and automatically you can rock on the stage. Right. And then resist panics yet. So this is a virtual classroom, and the teacher wants to give you some video, or teacher wants to present some PPT, and the PPT is not visible. So what has happened to us now also? So if it happened, we should not show our panic. We have to resist our panic, and we have to get into the work. If you are not control your nervousness, then you cannot see even the process already what you know. Okay, so that's why we have to control our panic while we do the virtual classes, and the same thing for the real classroom also. And the ninth rule is the thing that is avoid mannerism. Of course, every human being have their own mannerism, but if you get into the teaching profession, you have to control everything, because you are the role model to the students. So you cannot show any of your mannerism. So avoid touching your hair or face. And if the ladies are there, they used to just as adjust their saris or dupattas. These things must be avoided while we speak. Okay, while we on the camera, we should not touch our dress or hair or whatever may be the other things. And not only is this distracting to students, but it appears more nervous than confident on camera. If we keep on adjusting our dress, then it tells the student that we are not comfortable with the dress, or we are not confident about the dress, or what the thing. Okay, so we have to avoid all these things. So instead, speak clearly and use your hands to gesture lightly alongside your words. That is like complimenting with the nonverbal, or with iconic hand gestures, or with an pointing. You can use hands to express the meaning of the words. So these are all the 9 rules of our language teacher that we have to follow it, and most of the points are related to the real classroom also. And few more techniques. Can I extend? Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am. We have 15 minutes more.
Okay. Okay. So the other technique or the motivation or the way we can make the students to learn language is there is interactive speech practices. So this is called an English corner. Of course, it is started in Japan, I think so. So in the arts college or in the colleges, the students are asked to gather in a garden or in the square yard, where students will be there, and the teachers also with them in the party like, and there every student has to speak only in English, and if they want to interact with their favorite teacher, they have to talk in English, and the teacher will interact with them only in English. And during that time, teacher are asked to use the rare words, that is the words which are not used by the students, but it is important for the communication that they are asked to use it. And when they use, if the student are not understood, because they are making a question, okay, so while we giving, they are in showing interest on a particular subject and they are asking doubt, and when we clear those doubts with with those rare words, then they will know the connotation of it, they will know the context of it, and they will get the meaning of it. And while they perceive these meaning, they won't forget it. Okay, so this is also a technique of enriching our vocabulary, that is called an English corner. This we can practice in our college at the weekend. If it is on a Saturday working day, the last 1 hour may be the English corner, and we can make a practice to our students. And then next one is that we all know about in a spell bee, and if we ask the students to join in it, so they can, the spell bee international prepare students not just for exams but for their academic and career success also, because the spell bee expansive vocabulary in English guarantee is superior understanding of other subjects too, and create access to all the world knowledge. Okay, so they can be the member of Spell Bee International. And another important thing that a student must imbibe this is reading the newspaper or the magazines. They must make a friendship with the magazine, or they must be addicted to reading the newspaper or the subject related magazines. So if they have this practice, definitely they can acquire more knowledge, and with that they can succeed in their life. And another one is evolution of words that we know it, that's Facebook, Twitter, and email and SMS. Through that, if they try to write their thoughts, then it will be the writing practice. And exhibiting self-importance. If the students are confident enough about a particular topic or about a particular subject, or if they want to share some of the knowledge to the world, then they can create their own blogs. So if they have an own blogs, and if they import all the information about their experience, that will be give more confidence to the students. And this is about a public speaking. So the public speaking, that is a TED Talks and the Toastmaster, these two international things. And most of our Indians, many of our Indian students participated in it. And few of the IAS and IPS, how they got, her name is Shruti, I think so. And she has given a wonderful presentation in this TED Talks, and it gain more than millions of likes. And like a Toastmaster also, if we want to have a Toastmaster in our college, and we can be from the college, we can be the member of it, and we can make the students to present, and they are giving all the skills of communication too. And thank you very much. I think this presentation may help you improve your language teaching and learn the language.
Yes, of course, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much. The meeting is open for discussion now.
Yes.
We have one question from Ms. Rama Jayarajan. Ma'am, could you please share your overview how to maintain a healthy bond with the
How to maintain healthy
bond with the students? Yeah.
Bond with the students.
Yes, ma'am.
So again, it is with your pleasanting non-verbal communication. If you go to the classroom, or if you be there in a virtual class, the first person, and greeting everyone with their name, definitely you can attract the students. You can have a very healthy bonding with the students.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We have another question from Ms. Bhargavi. Ma'am, can you please convey a few ideas on how to facilitate students on the importance of English language in a virtual classroom?
Few ideas on how to facilitate students on the importance of English language in a visual classroom. Facilitate means we can provide enough YouTube lectures. What I have given you for the nuances of law, like that we can give some links, and even we can give the videos of a particular literary topic, like Dr. Justin, he has given The Old Man and the Sea. He has shared the video in his international conference. So like that, we can provide these technological tools to them to make a good bonding.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. If we have any more questions.
Bhargavi?
Yes, ma'am.
You have asked Seasons about the flashcard. Few more. Yeah. So this nuances can be the digital flashcard. Okay. So you can make like nuances of. I have given you talk and the laugh. Like that, you can make walk also. So if you make nuances for walk, then you can find more than 50 words. So those words, if you use it in a correct context, then people will think that yes, you are well versed within English. Okay. So try to make a few nuances for a particular action verbs. Will you do it?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Hello.
Yes,
I have raised a question there. Please ask you to answer it.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, this is from Mr. T.H. Lawrence. Dear Dr. Malati, ma'am, thank you very much for your touching upon many a point, especially on teaching etiquette, so to say. But I think the word 11 begins with a vowel sound, madam. Isn't it why we say an 11-member team?
So it starts with 11, but it's not about the 11. I told you about the wrong pronunciation of 11.
Unless we pronounce it with a vowel sound, how can we use the
11. 11.
No, it's 11. See,
11.
have to begin
11.
with the half vowel sound.
Oh.
As I understand.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Yes, that was the last question. So thank you, ma'am, for giving your valuable insights on the unique art of language teaching. The session was truly engaging and helpful. Thank you once again. Now we have come to the end of today's session. I would like to thank our beloved principal, Sister Maggie Jose, head of the department, Dr. Bindu and Philip, our resource persons for the day, Mr. Sean Hughes and Dr. Malati ma'am, our collaborator, Justin sir, coordinator, Ms. Jency James, and all my colleagues who are the part of organizing committee. My special thanks to all the participants for joining us today. Thank you all. Now, please fill the feedback form before signing out. So we will meet for tomorrow's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason sir.
Thank you very much. I missed the first 5 minutes of your session. I went for my lunch. That was my lunch time.
Oh.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it was a
Oh,
very, very elaborate session. It's like a full orientation program given to new lecturers who start their career. It was very informative and useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for
Thank you
your
very much.
efforts. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I wish you all a good evening.
Thank you very much, sir. And wish you the same.
Same to you, sir. Bye, everyone.
Dr. Bindu, you seem to be very busy.